so how many results do you think you would get if you did a Google search for autism treatment? Well, there we go. On January 14th, 103 million. And of course, I had a conniption fit and yelled, and the people downstairs in my house go, "What?" And I go, "It has a hyperbaric therapy on there." Oh my God. So anyway, what's new from the MPDC? This is very exciting. This is breaking news. You remember that the 27 evidence-based practices came to us out of the critical reviews by the National Autism Center and by the National Professional Development Center on Autism. And both of those were funded by grants, and then they kind of end. And we're all going, well, who's keeping on looking at the literature? So this was just created. It's a link on our Captain website, the National Clearinghouse on Autism Evidence and Practice, and they are funded to continue doing those critical reviews of those peer-reviewed journals, the research, and all of the work that goes into determining what is an evidence-based practice and what is research-based. And so there's a link on there, and that's going to keep us up to date. They hope to publish a report in the winter of 2018, but this latest review that they're working on is 2012 and 2017. And so if you guys want to participate as a critical reviewer, I think you would be amazing. And you can just go to this website. I signed up. I don't know if I'll get chosen or not, because you are going to get screened based on your experience and your degrees. So we'll see. But I think of anybody who should be doing it, it should be you experts who are definitely in this room. Last year, we mentioned to you the Supreme Court heard a case called the Endrew versus Douglas County case. And it was about, you know, what is free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment? It was for all students with disabilities, but it just so happened that the little boy from Colorado had an autism spectrum disorder, and the family felt that the current interpretation by the 10th Court of what they call de minimis, meaning, well, you just have to give them enough special ed and make enough progress, and that's enough. And that had been held up for a really, really, really long time, until somehow the planets were aligned, and what they came up with was, guess what? De minimis is not enough. And so recently what they have just printed is, a year later, questions and answers on what is FAPE in the least restrictive environment. And so basically the Supreme Court said that merely more than de minimis standard by the 10th and the other circuit courts is no longer considered good law. And here's the quote that they explained. A student offered an educational programming provided more than de minimis progress from year to year can hardly be said to have been offered an education at all. IDEA demands more. And so now, as a result of this case, each child's educational program must be appropriately ambitious in light of his or her circumstances, and every child should have the chance to meet challenging objectives. And what was happening with this particular student is the IEP was just staying the same year after year. Well, we'll just stick with these goals again. We didn't quite get there. And so those days are gone. They said IDEA really is about an individualized education plan. Who is the student? What are their strengths and weaknesses? What are ambitious goals that really teach them to the standards and have high expectations for them to have academic achievement? There's lots of kind of easy to read. I reread them again last night, the frequently asked questions, and they knew that they needed to tell us all what that meant. Raise your hand if you are folks who are in IEP meetings making decisions about FAPE and LRE. So I would suggest that this is your nightly reading. I have the link right here. And in the end, it's really, we just have to do what's right for our students, absolutely. Kristen talked about this, about aligning Captain with other initiatives.
So one of the challenges that we have, obviously, is helping people understand how all of the things that we're proposing they do, implement the 27 evidence-based practices with fidelity, is beneficial to more than just the student population of kids with autism. And one of the ways that we can do that is by aligning the work that we're doing and showing the overlap with other initiatives and other things that are going on. Ann and I were at the Inclusion Collaborative earlier this year, sharing some information about Captain, and heard the SUMS initiative, the folks from Orange County that are doing the scaling up of multi-tiered systems present. And they presented this graphic showing the systems of engagement. And we thought, well, where does Captain fit in this initiative? Where are the cadre members in terms of this effort to align all of the systems? So the county, region, and state source of technical assistance, that's where you guys are. You are a technical assistance resource, and in those systems of support that are rolling out now to help districts improve outcomes for students, students with disabilities, they should be and need to be looking towards you guys to help improve the outcomes for students with autism.
So another endeavor that we undertook was, there's so many initiatives out there, and the last thing we want is to be, and then autism. You know, autism's over here, we have our EBPs, we have our own little world, and we're super special. What we want to do is really integrate ourselves into what's going on. And although Universal Design for Learning is probably 25 or 30 years old, it's made a resurgent because now general educators have to be able to provide access, right? We're one system. It's education for all students. And how do you make all students have access to the curriculum to achieve the standards, right? And our students with disabilities as well. And so we kind of sat down, and Kirsten, is Kirsten here?
Kirsten, there she is.
There you are, thank you. We had sentences, and then she created it all in this beautiful graphic. So we now have infographics on the Captain website, so that if you guys are entertaining and having conversations at school or at teacher meetings and Universal Design for Learning comes up, this is a way that you can link that and say, yeah, we do that with autism. Look, here are the evidence-based practices in these 3 learning areas: flexibility and engagement, expression, and in presentation. And we have evidence-based practices which help increase that universal design for learning.
Same with PBIS and school-wide positive behavior supports. Really, all of the evidence-based and effective practices for classroom behavior and school-wide behavior, there's direct alignment with the EBPs for autism. So this is another infographic that is now under the Captain resources that's available to you guys that really shows how those things directly line up. We might call it something a little bit different in the autism literature or in the evidence-based practices that we're promoting and using, but there's direct alignment with just general good PBIS practices and behavior practices.
How many of you are in PBIS schools that they've kind of taken that and engaged? Well, see, you have a perfect opportunity, because literally on the left-hand side are those EBPs for behavior, and that's straight from PBIS literature. And then on the other side, there's our EBPs.
How many of you have ever gone in to look at within your school district or your SELPA the number of students that you actually have on IEPs who are qualified under the autism category? A couple of you. So we have a really easy system in our state to be able to go in and find those numbers. And I think it's part of helping us move the needle by showing the directors and showing the superintendents just how many students with autism we are serving and supporting. So DataQuest is a really easy tool that you can use. And what we did is on the Captain resources, we wrote out a step-by-step task analysis for how to use DataQuest to go in for your SELPA or your school district, identify the number of students with autism, graph it and map it out so that you have a way of visually displaying that information to your administrators. And these are 2 examples. I did this for Sac County last year as we were promoting a professional learning community for autism, showing them the rising rates over the last several years, and in the current year, the age distribution. So if you need to make a case for where to target your professional development, and you're looking at, well, where do we have the majority of kids? You'll be able to graph that out and make the case for professional development more clearly. We also, as a new resource on the Captain website, have a step-by-step task analysis for how to do it at the individual student level. And Heather, who's in boot camp right now, did a great job of being able to make this really user-friendly for those who may not be as familiar with how to use Excel. To be able to graph data. And I wanted to show you this example because this is the kind of thing that if you collect this information on your implementation work and show it to anyone, what you guys are doing sells itself. So this is an example of graph data on the right for a student who was having significant noncompliance during transitions. We did a baseline of compliance during transitions versus noncompliance during transitions, and then started implementing visual schedules. Simple EBP. On the left was tracking the teacher fidelity of that practice. So you can see as the fidelity of use of the visual schedule went up, the student's behavior changed in the desirable direction. But for the teacher and the principal and the people paying for the release time for the teacher to come to training and get coaching, to actually see that direct relationship between use of the practice and change in student behavior, really, really powerful. So the resource on the Captain website walks you through exactly how to do that. And I would encourage you guys to think of ways that you can graph your fidelity and your student behavior change and show it to your teachers, because that's really going to sell them on the coaching and the work that you're doing.
On our Captain YouTube page, so you know that when you go to the front page and you go to the very bottom, all our social media links are there, our Facebook, our Instagram, and our YouTube. The YouTube page now, it has all of our videos. So remember last year we video recorded the summit? Those are all there. This year's summit will be there. And then eventually, because you guys keep asking us when you do the what are EBPs for ASD, and there's that little slide that says show a video, and you go, I don't have a video. Well, our goal is to come up with videos for you to use as a resource to demonstrate an effective practice for evidence-based practice. Like, what does a visual support schedule look like? What does peer mediation intervention look like? What do those look like? So we're starting to build a video bank for you guys to use so that when you do your presentations, because you guys know a picture is worth 1,000 words. But in the meanwhile, you'll have access to exactly all the summit information that we're having as well. We want to remind you about our families that we want to support and remind you about the Autism Speaks toolkits. Raise your hand if you're familiar with those. So not everyone. It's really amazing. There's all kinds of step-by-step, well-researched information that we can give to families and even use for educators as well. But lots of our children have difficulty sleeping. They have difficulty with eating. They have difficulty going to the dentist and getting blood drawn, toileting. There's all kinds of amazing, and this just keeps going, exponentially at a rate where I can't even keep up with the number of ones that they have. But they look like this. This is the one about going to the laboratory. It even has the visuals in there. I mean, I think if I was a parent and I, said something to my educator, like I have to take him to go get some blood drawn, what are we going to do? Or I have to take him to the dentist. They have the visuals already ready to go, so it's not even, it saves you time and effort, and I know you want to support the families as well. So now we're going to move on to the Department of Developmental Services, and Emily Christine's here today. Christine Bagley, our Community Program Specialist from Early Start and Services, and she's going to get us up to date on DDS stuff.
I'm from the Department of Developmental Services. We are the state agency that oversees the 21 regional centers which help facilitate services and sports for individuals with developmental disabilities across their lifespan. So today I wanted to share with you an updated information on caseload numbers. Just for your information, all of this data can be found on our website in our DDS fact book. And this fact book is our 14th edition. So this first slide And in the fact book, it shows you the 2006 to the 2016 comparison in numbers. So you can see that in 2016, the total consumers served by the department was 181,000. And of those, 31,000 roughly had a diagnosis of autism. In 2016, the total amount of consumers increased to 253,000, and of those, 82,000 had a diagnosis of autism. So that number has doubled. So this slide shows that in January of 06, 17% of the consumers had a diagnosis of autism, which has increased to 33% as of 2016. This slide shows both an increase overall and the increase in just autism from 2015 to 2016. So there was a 2% increase in just 1 year, and overall a 4% increase in consumers in the entire system. This slide shows co-occurring disabilities. You can see that so 2006 is in the orange, and then 2016 is in the gray. You can see the jump there from 2006 to 2016. Also, this is broken out by ID, epilepsy, CP, and then 5th category. And you can see that there's just steady increases in co-occurring disabilities. This slide shows the breakout in age group, autism by age group in 2016. And so of the current population, this is kind of interesting, 45% of the individuals with autism are between the ages of 3 and 21 years of age. So that's your guys' population school. And you know, these numbers are continuing to grow. So that's just kind of a brief update. It's probably not anything you guys don't know, that autism, you know, is increasing.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the ABX21, which is the funding that came from DDS. It's kind of nice that I followed Christine. You guys are so smart. Funding that went out to the regional centers to address disparity. And luckily for you guys, we have a subject matter expert on this coming up after me, I think. Sorrel, is she right after me? It's going to talk a lot more about the disparity funding. But what leadership wanted me to do was talk a little bit about some of the projects that specifically wrote the FRCs in their applications. Now, I understand the new funding announcements went out like in the last couple of days, so there's a second cycle that'll be starting. And I hear that some places have been notified, so there'll be some new projects, and maybe we can add a little slide to the end of this so we can update those. Also, a lot of the FRCs are, I think, involved through subcontracting, which is probably not included in what I have here. So if you guys are doing something fabulous at the local level that we don't cover, also let us know and we can add that in as well. So Westside is looking at designing some parent-to-parent training models and specifically using parent leaders through the FRCs and using video models, and then also using those parent leaders to do some outreach and training to assist parents, and also looking at transportation and childcare for their events, because you know probably childcare is a huge barrier for families in trying to attend events. So that's one of the strategies that they're trying. Tri-Counties, they're doing a collaborative with the regional center, the family resources, and the Promotora programs. This was kind of a fabulous model, you know, the Promotora program, and I can't speak to it as an expert certainly, but it's being used more and more through the FRCs to get folks out into the communities that are actually members of a specific community. So they're working on the transitional youth, Hispanic, to increase their service awareness, and also doing advocacy training. San Gabriel Pomona had several different parts of their particular application. They're funding a Mandarin outreach speaker or outreach specialist at the FRC to specifically address that community. Also a Vietnamese outreach specialist, again, to connect specifically with the Vietnamese community. And they're also doing the childcare piece. So it'll be interesting to see how that, if that changed how folks were able to attend.
Now we have our hot topics in research. So we have Dr. Jessica Sirheinrich, and who's also, our lead on our research.
So I'm happy to be here to present some actual data that came from research that you all participated in last year. So at the summit last year, I stood here and said, please complete our survey. Please participate in these focus groups. We need your input, and we need to know what these processes are like in terms of trying to get evidence-based practices into your programs. So what I'm going to be sharing today is some of the preliminary findings that we have. So as you know, many roles are involved in provision of services for students with autism in school settings. So although the special education teacher is often coordinating across all of these different roles, there are key players that influence how well evidence-based practices are going to be accessed or accessible for students with autism. And this project really aimed to look at leadership structure and how that plays a role in implementation of school-based interventions for students with autism. So in consideration of this larger context of how implementation of EBPs happens, what role does leadership play? And so thank you again for those of you who completed the survey. This was a 63-item survey that involved some implementation measures. I'm just going to talk about outcomes related to 2 of these, the implementation leadership scale, and then also reports of staff involvement in the implementation process. So who's involved in these key decisions? I started with our mid-level specialists primarily through Captain, but we also surveyed folks across the state at different levels within educational organizations. So district administrators, school site principals, and teachers and other providers. Our preliminary results include 331 respondents. So we had a good response both from our Captain cadre who are representing CELPAs, but then also from others across the state. And what I want to show you first is some information about leadership practices supporting implementation. So as a reminder, the survey asked questions about how supported you feel by leaders within your organization in different aspects that are related to implementation. And what we see here is that there are certain items that were ranked more highly and that were also ranked lower. So you can see with the numbers that the categories of know what they're talking about and support employee efforts to learn more were most highly indicated. So in general, you felt and others felt that these were ways that your leaders were supporting you in implementing evidence-based practices. However, removing obstacles received the lowest score. So even though leadership may really promote the use of evidence-based practices, the removal of obstacles is not always happening or happening at a lower level. We also looked at this same information when we pulled out the largest school districts in the state. So we looked at people who completed the survey and their responses if they were from some of the largest school districts to see if there were any differences. And what you can see here is that there were statistically significant differences in several categories: removal of obstacles, establishing clear expectations, answering staff's questions, and supporting employee efforts to learn more, in which those from the largest school districts said their leaders were not doing as well supporting them in implementation of EBPs. The next question that we wanted to explore was who is involved in critical implementation activities. So what specific job roles were involved? And we asked a few different questions around this topic. So with regard to choosing new educational interventions for students with ASD, who's involved in that process of selection? And we broke down specific job titles into high-level leaders or district administrators, mid-level leaders, which were often specialists, behavior program, autism specialist, school site leaders, which were principals, and teachers and other providers. And so the respondents, you all again, had the opportunity to say which folks were involved in these different decisions. So as you can see here, mid-level leaders were indicated most strongly as choosing evidence-based practices or choosing educational practices along with teachers, then high-level leaders with school site leaders indicated least frequently. Is this a surprise to anyone? No, okay. We also said who has the most impact. If you could only choose one role that has the most impact in this decision, who is it? And what we see is mid-level leaders. The good news is that that represents really our focus through Captain, getting the right information on which programs are going to be most effective and how to select and identify programs to meet the needs of your district. That is what we're doing here, and so it's really encouraging that we're targeting the right individuals. Okay, next question. Who's involved in determining what resources are available for new educational interventions for children with ASD? Any guesses? High level, yes. So this brings up a different question. When we're talking about allocation of resources, getting money, time, the additional supports that are needed to make implementation effective, what we see is a big shift to the high-level leaders and the high-level leaders most highly indicated. Actively providing training in new educational interventions for children with ASD. So who's actually doing the training? Who's on the ground working with teachers and other providers? You guys are so good. So we see mid-level leaders here with lower secondary numbers for teachers, some high-level leaders, and very low numbers for school site leaders. And again, mid-level leaders having the highest impact there. So in summary, what we know at this point, based on your responses and responses from others across the state, is that implementation leadership behaviors vary, meaning there are some things that leaders are better at doing in terms of supporting implementation of evidence-based practices, and there are some aspects that are more challenging or where we still need to do some work. Large districts at this point seem to have lower endorsement of leadership supports for implementation. So there might be more struggles in either the communication of these supports or actively supporting providers as we try to use practices in the field. And then the number of personnel roles vary in terms of how planning and implementation happens, and the key personnel vary. So why is this important? It really helps us to address in a more targeted way specific issues around implementation of evidence-based practices. What programs are important, what resources are needed, who needs to be equipped to provide training. This type of research and this type of data should all inform those types of questions so that we can be more effective in our outreach.
And now, Dr. Michelle Dean. This is her own research, and we thought this was so fascinating and amazing that we wanted her to share it with you. And I would just like to say, listen to this. How many of you are on assessment teams at your school to make determination of autism eligibility? Yeah, think about this information as it applies to the work that you're going to go back and do in that arena.
So we know that we've got a great deal of difficulty identifying autism in girls, especially girls without intellectual disability. And so the camouflage hypothesis states that girls with autism are better at hiding or masking their social challenges or using compensatory behaviors. However, when we look more closely at girls, they still are having these social struggles. So when we think about the word camouflage, it really highlights the importance of the environment. Maybe if we look more closely at the way girls and boys with autism interact with their environment, that might give us a better understanding of why it is difficult to detect autism in girls. So my colleagues, Robin Harwood and Connie Kazari, and I designed a study, and we asked the following research questions. To what extent do environmental factors like gender-related social behaviors and activities play a role in helping girls with autism to mask their symptoms? Are girls with autism better at camouflaging their symptoms of autism and using compensatory behaviors to mitigate their social difficulties? And are the symptoms of autism more obvious and are they easier to detect in boys? So we looked at 96 kids with and without autism. We had equal sample sizes. So we had 24 girls with autism, 24 boys with autism. Boys and girls with autism were matched by age, sex, city of residence, and IQ. And then we matched the kids with autism to a typically developing peer. The typically developing peer was in the same class, the same age, and the same sex. We observed all these kids on the playground during recess. And each one of these lines, this is a standard observation instrument, each one of these lines counts for a minute. So during that minute, we coded to see if the child was solitary, which means they were alone or with an adult. Joint engaged, they were actively socializing with a peer or peers, or game. The child was actively playing a game with rules with a peer or peers. So then we also put some notes sort of describing what they looked like in that engagement state. So here's an example of that. Joint engaged, walking and talking with one girl, happy, joint engaged, walking and talking with one girl on the jungle gym, laughing. So we used a mixed methods analysis. We looked at the engagement states, the proportion of time each group was in each engagement state, and then we looked at those qualitative notes to understand what joint engage, what solitary, or what game looked at with each one of these groups. And then we once we identified salient activities within each groups and the engagement states, we developed a profile for each group. So girls with autism, boys with autism, typically developing boys, typically developing girls. So here we go. Typically developing boys spend a significant amount of time in game. In fact, they spend significantly more time in game than all other groups. Their most salient activities were playing ball games. So the kiddos who were playing ball games spent about 67% of their recess in that game, and talking. So the kiddos who were talking spent about 41% of their recess time talking. And this is what that looks like. Joint engaged, getting in a game or getting a game organized with other kids. Joint engaged, walking around to invite kids to play. Game, playing handball. Game, got out, conversation on the bench, laughing and watching play. Typically developing girls, not surprisingly, spend a large proportion of their time in joint engage, and they are talking and flitting. Flitting. What is flitting? Well, we coded flitting when we saw a child moving across 3 or more activities for about an equal proportion of time during the observation interval. So typically developing girls like to flit. This is what that looks like. Joint engage, walking with 2 girls, smiling and talking. Joint engage, sitting in a circle, pretending to paint each other's nails. Joint engage, 3 girls get up, hold hands, and start running. Joint engage, start chasing a boy around, laughing and happy. Boys with autism. Boys with autism spend a significant proportion of their recess solitary. In fact, they spent more time in solitary than all other group. Significantly more time in solitary than all other group. In solitary, their most salient activity was wandering, and I'm sure each and every one of you can picture the kiddo with autism wandering around the playground. They also spent, their second most salient activity was talking, which they did for 17% of the observation interval. This is what they looked like. Solitary, sitting alone, eating a snack. Solitary, aide comes up and sits at the table with him. Solitary, another aide comes up and talks to that aide. Solitary, smiling, starts to go to the yard. Solitary, wandering around with head down, alone. Girls with autism. The most popular engagement state was joint engaged, followed closely by solitary. Most popular activities or salient activities were talking, which the girls who were talking spent about 44% of the observation interval talking, and flitting. Only flitting was a solitary activity, not a joint engage activity. So this is what this looks like. Joint engage, caterpillar activity with 4 girls. Solitary, walked away from girls, walked close to a crowd of boys, no talking. Solitary, standing near a group of girls, not part of, but close. Joint engage, initiates to girls to do something else, conversation. So this study supports the camouflage hypothesis. Typically developing girls, the social behavior of typically developing girls is very fluid, and it provides a perfect backdrop for girls with autism who are often hovering close by. So if I was a playground supervisor or a paraprofessional or a teacher, simply scanning the playground would not be enough for me to recognize girls with autism because they looked like typically developing girls moving in and out of peer groups. But girls with autism were flitting from joint engaged to solitary or from solitary to solitary. So this suggests that while their social challenges were hidden from adult supervisors, they did not appear to be hidden from their peers. In contrast, typically developing boys spend a large proportion of their recess playing games, organized games with rules. So if I was a playground attendant, teacher, or supervisor, and I scanned the playground, it would be fairly easy for me to detect boys with autism because they are not playing the game. So this really has implications for our applied practice and thinking about identifying and supporting girls with autism at school. Because compensatory behaviors are only a strength if they give you access either to high-quality relationships or access to services. But in our current model, we have a difficult time identifying girls with autism because we are unable to really get in there and recognize the social challenges. So the implications of this research is to provide more awareness about the importance of really looking at the way children interact. And one thing is that girls were able to be in joint engaged for a significant amount of time, and so their treatment or their intervention may need to look different than boys with autism, but we should certainly consider the environment when thinking about interventions and help girls with autism maintain a joint engaged state and sort of reduce this solitary state.
So now we have Sorrel Markowitz, who will be coming up and filling us in on stuff going on at our regional centers.
One of the things that was mentioned by Debbie was the issue of disparity within the regional center system. And the whole system, DDS, has been looking at disparity and looking at the increase in our population. In 2016, Hispanics became the largest ethnic group, representing 37% of the total number of clients that the regional center serves. The data also, unfortunately, reflected quite a variance in the services and the purchase of service expenditures for that population. And it was particularly by ethnicity and language. Hispanics have the lowest per capita expenditures, and as Debbie also indicated, we're really looking at and are focusing on finding those families, working with those families, and trying to provide as much support and service as is required. And we've all done that in a variety of different ways. Asian consumers are over 22, have the highest utilization rate of services, and of course, as has been indicated, the per capita expenditures for whites is higher than everyone else. So there have been, there was an allocation in 2017 or 2016 of $11 million for regional centers to address disparities through purchase of service, and we develop resources in the underserved communities. That has been going on across the state since then. Cultural specialists have been hired at a variety of regional centers. Some regional centers have also, Westside and others, have hired or designated 2 or 3 service coordinator positions specifically dedicated to working with the families who are underserved. What we're finding is that there are so many reasons for the issue of being underserved that it's taking our service coordinators a much longer time to work through and access services for families, look at resources across the community to help support them that go beyond just what the regional center system can provide them. It's been really illuminating, actually. We have looked at developing community agencies to do outreach and parent training on advocacy, as Debbie had stated, and many of us have done contracted with community agencies to train parent advocates, which we are doing at Westside Regional Center. Those advocates are being trained as we speak to go out into the community and provide support to families to access services not through just the regional center, but also through education and through generic resources. So they're being trained on advocacy as well as individual rights under the law. And we're all very clear about what those rights are and making sure that the advocates are aware of what those are. Some of us who were active in the 60s are really, really working on this issue. I'm going to move on to the CBS final rule, and how you folks all knew about CBS and HCBS and the final rule. The date has been extended. It was to be implemented in 2019. Now the date is 2022. And in a way, that we were a little concerned about that, but at the same time, it's given us much more time to plan, prepare, and help the community, the entire community, be ready for what this is going to mean. So there have been funds allocated as well to help providers change their programs, help with training of staff, et cetera, so that programs can expand and change their focus. We won't be seeing sheltered workshops much anymore. We will not be seeing the same kind of residential options that we had in the past for families. Integration and inclusion is the focus of all of these changes. And these changes are actually coming from the federal government, and supposedly, we hope, will be supported by the federal government. So it's a really great opportunity for us as we're working through the disparity, this disparities piece, as well as through HCBS and the final rule, to really start helping people understand evidence-based practice and how evidence-based practices can be included in a lot of the work that people are doing with individuals as they're preparing them to be more involved in community, helping staff address issues using EBPs on a regular basis. So it's kind of exciting from that perspective as well. I think we went over last year, but you will be able to access on the website also what all the focus is through CMS and HCBS requirements, but it's integration across all aspects of life, pretty much. I already stated that there was technical support and funding. We are working with our local high schools and post-secondary agencies to really help with a focus as well on work. And what Kristen White was talking about earlier really fits in, of course, to all of this. And so we're all working together to help make this happen. Self-determination, people, I think, are familiar with self-determination. Basically, there are 5 principles of self-determination, which include freedom, authority to control your individual budgets and purchase of services, support and arrange resources and personnel to assist in the way that's necessary and to integrate in community, and helping people and giving people the opportunity to be more responsible for decisions in their own lives, using public dollars as well, and confirmation of their critical role in making decisions like this. So the law was signed in 2013. At this point, although it was passed in California, our proposal has not yet been accepted by the federal government. We are looking at submission of yet another revision by the end of January. Looks like there were only 2 questions left that had to be readdressed, and we're actually very hopeful that by spring, self-determination will be implemented here in California. That's the latest from the last self-determination advisory meeting, which was held a week ago. So that's where we are at this point in time. Self-determination, as most of you know, is really designed to really help people achieve their personally desired outcomes using the budgets that we would be utilizing were we the people who were basically controlling the funds. So There will be a specific budget that they have based on services from the prior 12 months, and they will be able to come to us with requests for certain services that, under the regulations here in the state, we are not able to fund. So some people will be utilizing funds that the federal government under Medicaid actually allows. The demographics are age, disability, ethnicity, and gender. And each regional center has been allotted a number based on their own population. So, for instance, Westside Regional Center, which I am an employee of, is one of the smallest in the state, and we will have 67 spaces at the very beginning of self-determination. Everyone must attend an information session so that they understand what self-determination is in order for the name of their individual in the family to be submitted to the state of California, to be chosen randomly once all the names have been submitted and the proposal is in effect. It's complicated, but it'll work. And so person-centered planning is a real big issue now. Years and years ago, it was a matter of course. Person-centered planning was the way that we did the planning for folks in the regional center system. And as we grew bigger and bigger, caseloads averaged 90 or 110. When I was a service coordinator, if I had 45 people on my caseload, that was a lot. It's a long time ago. So it's really incorporated into both HCBS and self-determination and disparity and all of the things that we're doing now. So there's a big focus on training for person-centered planning. And actually, you know, the role of educators is really important in this whole person-centered planning issue, because when families are doing the person-centered planning, they're going to want their education folks involved in that person-centered planning. You know the individuals. However, the only people who attend a person-centered planning session are people that the individual or the family invite. So don't be insulted if they don't invite you. But please do participate if they do invite you, because it'll be really important both for the planning from the educational perspective as well as planning from the regional center perspective. So then we move on to local partnership agreements. And again, following what the others have talked about, what Kristen White focused on, there is a really strong need for local partners to really work together in order for integration into the community to happen, not just for people with autism, but for all people with disabilities. And so the core partners are the education agencies, Department of Rehabilitation, regional centers, and we're really looking at critical ways that we can really work to make sure that our individuals are served as they choose. And we're working on, you know, opportunities for higher education, opportunities for work, and how do we help people prepare for those things. There are so many resources that we have, and I think there are many times when we're essentially double dipping. We're doing exactly the same things, and instead of really working together to make sure that we're utilizing our resources and improving not just employment outcomes, but educational outcomes as well. So the whole idea is to connect folks with community resources and natural supports, and that's really a big focus of what we're trying to do on a regular basis through the regional centers, and help people utilize benefits. There are so many people who don't use benefits like in-home support services or Department of Rehabilitation or other benefits that people can utilize. Opportunities for career exploration and development, and again, post-secondary training. Quite a few of the regional centers have actually developed collaborative relationships with community colleges. A number of us have college-to-career programs where folks are supported by some of our vendors in order to be able to attend college. It's really wonderful. And providing information on transition that is really user-friendly and will reflect the cultural context of the person. And I think that as we got more information about the whole disparity issue, it really became very, very clear that we have to be much more focused on cultural issues than we have been in order to help families be more comfortable in accessing all of our resources that are available to them. We're looking at having people in 24 and under not in less than minimum wage jobs, and we know that there's a lot of competition out there for employment. So we have to do the best we can to really support them in and developing the skills they need in order to be even able to apply for jobs in the community. And we have to educate our community, and we can do that all together.
You know, when we think about person-centered planning and self-determination, and raise your hand if you are in the schools working directly with individuals, right, ages 16 to 22. Think about our student-led IEPs, working on that communicative competence that Kristen talked about earlier, being able to advocate for themselves, to lead their IEP meetings, gets them ready to be doing these activities that will be expected for them to be person-centered, have self-determination, be able to communicate at a meeting about what services they want, what they want to spend their money on, et cetera. So, you know, everything is everything, isn't it? So now just getting to, that was just a little foreshadowing of Sharon Floyd, who is on our leadership team, and she's going to talk about that transition piece. So I transitioned the transition.
How many of you have dealt with students when they're transitioning from an activity to another to have difficulty transitioning? They have problems with, I'm not finished yet, I'm not finished yet. We've actually seen students who engage in behaviors because what? They haven't finished one task before they move to the next task. And I show this because it's a perfect example of moving it outside of the classroom into the real world. How many of you have been working on things or IEPs that are not finished yet for your reason? And you have difficulty with transitioning. Every time I look at transition, I think about our students outside the classroom. From the time that they're in preschool to the time they walk across that stage, either with a diploma or certificate, are they really ready for the real world? The goal of transition services is planned movement from secondary to educational adult life. And I've been up here before talking about transition that really should start at what age? When they're in preschool. Starting getting them ready for those transitions, those basic things we do every day that can impact us during lifetime. So if we look at it, a lot of times our focus is on what? The academic skills, because that proves that our students are making progress. But we also need to look at the transition skills. I have students who have attended four-year universities that are sitting on the couch playing video games because they have the skill set, but how do they implement that into the real world? We're talking about a quality of life for our students. Are they prepared when we look at the different areas? How prepared are our students for their life after graduations in academic, social, communication, and functional? We need to consider all of those levels. If we look at the factors, understanding their strengths, accepting the hurdles, how much control do they have, successful employment, and in a support system. We have a strong support system in the school systems, don't we? We have people that are in there to help our students to fill those gaps. It's almost like they never really have to fall down hard. My nephew, when he was really, really little, was in a chair, and he was about 2 years old. He kept leaning back, and I'd catch him every time. And my sister's like, let him fall. I'm like, that's mean. And so she said, no, he'll never learn. And so he fell over, and he looked right at me like, where was my support system? And I'm like, you don't have an IEP, so you don't have a support system. So one of the things we look at is how often do we let our kids really, not in the fact that they're going to fail drastically, but suffer the consequences of some of their decisions. Are we so supportive that when they get in the real world and those support systems not there, they can't navigate through that? So we look at it, really and truly, my predecessor speaking, Sorrell in particular, said that students with self-determination skills are better prepared to participate in planning for their future and making decisions. Again, your quality of life is higher when you can make decisions for yourself. Kristen talked about that with her daughter, deciding what her evening schedule was going to be. You have more power and you feel more self-advocacy when you can make decisions on your own. So some of the underlying goals, self-awareness, what are their strengths, their hurdles, and what accommodations they may need, and the decision-making progress, student-centered planning and interaction. What does that student really want? How many of you have children of your own that you'll claim? Okay. A lot of times we say, well, my kid grows up, they're going to be this, or I want them to be this or that. And they typically go what? In the opposite direction. I asked my daughter, I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, a pediatrician. And I said, okay. Speech and language services coming up. I said, a pediatrician. She says, you know what that is, Mom. I'm like, I don't know what a pediatrician is. She was trying to say what? Pediatrician. And I'm like, that's all well and good. But we never really ask our students, no matter what their disability, what do you want to do? And do we really know what our students are capable of doing and what their likes and dislikes are? So post-secondary, realistic goals. Does the student want to attend college or university? What is the goal? One really important thing for families, where do the family and students see themselves in 5 to 10 years? And how can we prepare for that? Student interests, narrow interests. What are they really interested in? What really are their interests? Because that will motivate them to whatever careers they choose. And then the flexibility. Does the student have the flexibility? You saw in the video where he really got stuck on the fact that they were changing things and the service was no longer needed. And then the community base. How much are our students out in the community? And not as a field trip. Out there really doing things that are going to help impact them so that they can be successful in navigating the community. So not that this may be, some of these may be new to some people, but there's Naviance, and the website is there where districts can sign on, and it's an excellent website for navigating the high school students through really what they want to do. There's a survey for what their interests are. There's ways of getting messages from universities when things are coming up, so it's a strong resource. So if we look at one of the things that we look at, one of the teachers David really liked, and I don't know how many are familiar with the California Career Zone, but it's a really user-friendly website for teachers to navigate through. This is fun to do with elementary as well as middle school students. What are you interested in? And what skills and what training will you need to have? How much will you get paid? I thought when I went into education it was a lucrative business, but I guess not. No, I'm kidding. But we look at the different things. So this is a very good website and a very good resource for our teachers to use. So if we look at some of the stats, a lot of times our students who have a diagnosis of autism are often unemployed or underemployed. They find and lose jobs quickly. The cycle of low self-esteem and anxiety and health problems are included. Promoting successful work experience, evaluate their sensory needs. So what does that work environment look like that they're going to have to navigate through? And then survey, when we looked at students with ASD, part-time work may be what they can handle at this time and what that work looks like. Detailed job training and directions. We give a lot of directions in the schools, and sometimes that falls away when our students are in the job. They expect you to know how to do the job. We had one student that was actually doing workability, and he was standing there and not really participating. And I asked, what are you doing? And he said he was practicing being a supervisor. So I thought, well, he's got that down pat. We also look at the limited social interaction. What do you do when you're in that break room? And in one of our high schools, we actually set up a break room where the kids have to keep things clean. What is appropriate to have in your locker? Things that are maybe embarrassing for other students or other individuals to see. You know, what is your responsibility? In the teacher's lounge, I think that could help with some people knowing what should be the proper behavior. So we look at these things, not only the academic, but what are the social and leisure skills you need to have in order to be successful. So the top 10 attributes that you see are communication, honesty, teamwork, interpersonal skills, motivation. A lot of that has nothing to do with the job itself. It has to do with your interaction with your coworkers. A strong work ethic. How do you operationally define that? Analytical skills. So we look at, yes, when you go on a job, yes, you should have the ability to do the job, but do you have the ability to keep the job, which is a social interaction with your peers? Here's the attributes of employers want from college graduates, and this will be posted, so then you can look at those as well. Again, you see leadership is a high one, communication skills, verbal, strong work ethic. Again, still repeating the same things that employers are looking for. So I charge you to do this. We're going to look at, and Karen did this, there's a lot of things we look at self-advocacy, that there'll be resources that you can use to really have your students participate in some of their decision making. The more I can participate, the more it's a part of me, and the more I'm going to be motivated to engage in these activities and to engage in that. Another resource that's on there is from Sam Odom, where we look at, and it's on our captain's website, is the study that was done and also the characteristics and practices for challenging behaviors. Before I leave here, I've been in this business a long time, and so I've seen some of my students who've gone from preschool and who have graduated. And I've seen the progress that they've made, and I see the dedication that everyone has around them. But what I want them to be and what I want to see is that they're successful adults at the capability, whatever that is for them, because it's all about a quality of life. We do this for our typical children, whatever they are, haven't met one yet, but typical kids, we look at getting them prepared for the future. We need to have the same, I guess, enthusiasm for our students as well. Don't sell them short. However you can participate and make decisions for yourself, that improves your quality of life, and that's what we all want, is a good quality of life.
This is kind of sort of new. We introduced it at last year's summit. And the concept was every person in this room is an authorized awarder of this certificate. And we have all the directions and the, how to verify it and how to make sure that you're giving this award where it's, actually earned. But it's the Achievement of Implementation Fidelity. For an autism spectrum disorder practice. And this is just an example, and this would be one for visual supports, awarded to at what school and the date. And it's really quite an honor. And we have a couple of people in the room out of 400 cadre. 2 have taken this on, Laura Machado, and then Dustin Thornburg and Rochelle Chavez. Where's Laura Machado?
There's Laura
Would,
right there.
would you please come up here?
So not only has she done the training and the coaching to bring the teachers that were awarded this to Fidelity, using the Fidelity measures, being really systematic with everything, but she then went to the step of actually nominating them for the award and putting it through to be able to recognize them. And this is huge because, in our field in education, when you do a really good job at something and put effort into something, you don't get like a bonus. Or, I tell my husband all the time, I'm like, you don't even realize. Like, you get those little financial bonuses at the end of the year, or you get offered, like, a trip or some sort of an incentive. That doesn't happen in our field. Ultimately, what it comes down to for you guys as coaches is seeing your teachers succeed. And for the teachers, it's seeing their kids succeed. And so taking that extra step to give them that recognition, when it's not a bonus, it's not a trip anywhere, it's not anything fancy like that, just acknowledgement of their hard work is really important. So we wanted to call Laura up and thank her and show her our appreciation for recognizing her teachers.
So part of the process is that she completes the form and she sends it to Patty and me, and we look at it, and then we complete this beautiful award, but we digitally send it as an attachment to an email. But these are on cardstock, and they're really pretty, so you can take these back. The concept was that, she makes a big deal, and I said, would you send some photos, and look what you did. And I thought it was interesting if you want to talk are you comfortable with me doing this? Okay. But I said, send a photo of you and your teachers, right? And you had another comment about this photo. Why don't you explain kind of why you wanted to add some additional photos?
Sure. So I asked all of our teachers, and I said, Ann and Patty want me to present this to Captain and want us to take a picture together. And I said, we can do that, and we can do it just as us, or would you guys like to include your paraeducators as well? Because as we all know, paraeducators are the ones that are in there hands-on with our teachers day in and day out. And for us, we have a really large group of paraeducators that have gone through all of the EBP trainings. And so whenever I coach our teachers, I'm also coaching our paraeducators and working with them. And so all of our teachers said 100% yes, we want our paraeducators, and so everybody's here.
There you go. And then she made a big deal out of it. It's another way that we kind of heighten the awareness of all that hard work you're doing. Like Patty said, nobody gets money, but you can get honor and respect and notoriety and in the school newsletter.
They got Starbucks cards too.
Ooh, how did you do that? That's what they all want to know. Where'd you get that?
From Starbucks out of my wallet.
Oh, out of your wallet. I thought you had a secret to get free stuff.
With their rewards.
Okay,
Yes.
well, thank you for doing that, for sure. And two reasons. One, because we didn't have the South Summit. We wanted to have Rochelle Chavez. Are you in the room here? Yes, please come up and tell us about the awards that you gave. And here's the really pretty, suitable for framing. They are kind of pretty, don't you think? There's the hard cardstock copies.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your work and Dustin's.
Okay, so we worked with a preschool teacher, an elementary school teacher, and a middle school teacher. And we actually did this over 2 years. So the first year we did preschool. We worked with 2 preschool teachers, and the second year we worked with an elementary school teacher and a middle school teacher. And what was really nice about it is that after we had completed the first year, the teachers who were on board for the second year could go back and talk to those other teachers and say, okay, how hard is this? How can I do this? And they kind of cheered each other on. And what's really nice now is that we know, going from preschool through middle school, that these teachers all are trained in evidence-based practices, and they're all working together to make sure that the kids get what they need. So very exciting.
Did they like getting the award, or are we just imagining this?
Oh yes, so we had each school did their own thing, and one of them was a staff meeting, which was great. And I put pressure on the principals to give goodies to the teachers for their hard work. So they did flowers and things like that. But then the elementary school principal said, you know, we would like for you to do it at an assembly. So here I am at an assembly, and I have a speech, you know, and now I'm thinking, okay, so now I have to change my speech so that these 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds who are sitting in front of me are going to be as excited about this award as I am. So I just kind of modified it along the way, and I said, you know, this is a national research project. That's like the whole United States. Isn't that big? You know, and the kids are like, yes. So that was a little bit challenging, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah,
Thank
they loved
you.
it.
So how many of you in your coaching over this last year since the last summit were able to bring a teacher or a paraeducator that you work with to Fidelity on one evidence-based practice? Look at all those hands. You can nominate them for an award.
Please do.
If you do the training and coaching and bring them to Fidelity and they're able to demonstrate Fidelity over the course of the year, they're eligible. And this could be something that really, I mean, it's a small token, but in the same regard, it's a big deal. It could be a big deal. It could be a really big deal, you know, if we make it that way. So we want to encourage you guys. I would love to see like a whole platform of people up here next year.
I would like to be like going, I can't get all these done.
This would be a good way for us to
There's
be busy.
too many. The form is on the website. It's under Captain Resources. The directions are there. You fill it out. We trust that all of you understand what fidelity of implementation is over a period of time, and that you award someone that. And it's really part of implementation science, right? That the leaders recognize and reward those that are putting in the time, effort, and energy and being responsive to all the coaching that you're doing. So we would love, love, love not just to have 2 leaders out of the 400 and somebody. Yeah, so next year, make us proud.